Welcome to Psychology at Work. I'm Dr Paul Brewerton, otherwise known as the Strengths Guy. As a doctor of psychology and the founder and chair of StrengthScope, I'm here to share my insights with you. Tune in for a regular dose of positive, strengths-based content. My podcasts are packed full of tips and tools designed to enhance your world of work. Ready to dive into the good stuff in this episode? Then let's go. Hi, my name's Dr Paul Brewerton, the Strengths Guy, Doctor of Organisational Psychology, founder and chair of StrengthScope. I'm more than excited, Pete, to have you on the podcast today. We met for the first time last week, but I just feel like we could and have talked a lot in the short time that we've known each other. So welcome, Pete Thomond, Dr Pete Thomond, to the podcast. Hello.
Hello. Hey, thank you. Seriously, thank you for taking a leap with someone you just met.
I mean, it does happen. It's just not, it's not that often that it happens, but I'm just, we've had such good conversations up to now, so I'm really excited. And actually, we just to share with everybody, we were talking just before coming on, and I was going to do this whole big intro on you, right, which is basically your LinkedIn bio.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to do that because I'm just not, because people can read that if they want to.
Yeah,
because it's on LinkedIn, Pete Thomond, Thomond. And actually there it is. I can see your name. It's here on the screen right now for everybody. And anyway, everyone's going to know you because you're a famous guy. So it's fine.
oh, famous, yeah, right.
Oh, yeah, you are. However, would you like to introduce yourself, what you do, and what you're passionate about, please?
Oh, okay. Well, thank you. And yes, the LinkedIn profile is a little cringy for someone who struggles with that kind of stuff. But no, so I'm Pete. Well, actually, first and foremost, I'm a husband to an amazing woman called Kim, and dad to three incredible children, Ted, Finn, and Heidi. And that's my reason for being, really. Yeah. So, and everything else sort of stacks up to that. We've not gone down the family route much in our conversations, but as you just said it, I just thought, well, actually, what's that? That's my real calling, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my real calling. But yeah, in terms of what do I do? Well, effectively, everything I do is geared up around helping people's lived experience sit at the heart of decision making. Mm-hmm. I want a world where people have voice and leaders have true wisdom in the decisions that are being taken around today's most wicked issues. And that's it, really.
So so tell me, thank you for just starting with the most important stuff, which now I feel really bad that I didn't, but I didn't because I always introduce myself in the same way. But anyway, it's not about me, it's about you. So thank you for doing that. Tell me a little bit about, so you're Clever Together, right? You're CEO, chief exec of Clever Together. That's your organization, that's your business. And you're working across sectors, industries, like every go on.
Yeah, so about 80%, 85% of our work is with the healthcare sector here in the UK.
Right.
So a lot of our work is within the NHS, and I've got a huge passion for our NHS and health and well-being broadly.
Yeah.
Outside of that work, we've worked with organisations like Santander, Discovery Channel, Mars. Oh gosh, who else? Microsoft. But my passion really sits quite significantly with the health and care sector.
Yeah.
And also with the education space as well.
Yeah.
So for example, we've co-produced strategies for Exeter University, University of East Anglia, City University, Leeds University. So I guess health, education, and then my other passion. When I started this journey at Clever Together, I also co-founded a charity called Sport Inspired. So that was all about using an asset-based community development model to bring the voice of communities to the centre of projects that get kids connected to sport and using sport as a positive mental health and physical well-being approach to local communities. So in Sport Inspired, I've had the best part of 100,000 people involved in programs now. And at Clever Together, the whole raison d'etre at Clever Together, like I say, is about to really ensure people have voice in decisions.
Yeah.
And so we use instead of having trawling organizations with big teams of management consultants, we've disrupted the consulting model by using effectively a smart crowdsourcing platform that I invented with my colleague Alex. And we use that crowdsourcing platform as a way to capture the voice and lived experience and the evidence of people inside organizations or communities. So we've now had nearly 1 million people involved in our projects, actually.
Amazing.
across all these different groups in the last sort of 10 years. But what we've done, here's the really exciting bit for me, Paul, is we've ran Clever together really almost like it's a family business, a lifestyle business for the last decade. The first half of the decade was experimenting, because all of our methods are grounded in the literature and the science. And when we couldn't find methodological reasoning in the data, we were running experiments to fill the data gaps, if you like. I'm a recovering academic, maybe we'll get onto that in a bit. But so we were developing methodologies to help to effectively hold en masse deliberation events to help people really deliberate tricky issues around strategy or culture or other subjects, bringing the lived experience and evidence of people to the center of change. And so we experimented for the first 5 years, and the next 5 years we've gone on this really interesting journey, especially in the NHS and outside, of bringing the voice of staff and community members and stakeholders into strategy change, culture change, performance improvement, etc., and creating social movements. And actually, we're at a bit of an inflection point now, because I've realised that actually we're pretty good at this, but we just ran it like a family business, you know. And we've turned down a lot more work than what we've ever taken on. And we've just grown and grown. And then this time last year, I wasn't long out of hospital, and I had a bit of a health wobble. And all of a sudden, what was there had a huge wobble. Too much of it was depending on me. And I just thought, oh my God. And so I had to reboot the business. And in rebooting the business, I've been looking at it going, we do some good stuff. And I've realised so much of this journey. I'd called it a lifestyle business, and I've called it, what's the word? Like a family business, and we're keeping it small and boutique. But actually, the truth is, I was a little bit scared at the idea of being successful. That's probably a bit TMI.
Not at all. I think that's quite a I don't think that's just you. I do think there is that. I mean, the TMI would be getting into the reasons behind that, but let's not go there necessarily unless you want to. But I think that's quite a common thing for people who are, like they've started a business as a result of a passion that they have, and then it's like, but do I scale this? Is that really the journey I want to go on? Like, it's a tough one. It's not an easy decision.
So effectively, I had to make people redundant. I've never done that in my life. We'd grown to 25 people, and things were going well, and then all of a sudden I'm like, oh man, I've had this wobble. Things aren't quite right. And actually, the stuff in here that I really need to pursue, and the business model wasn't right. It was just this family thing, And just going through that process, unbelievably heartbreaking. I don't know if you've ever had to do it, Paul. Oh man, I remember being on my kitchen floor, literally crying. It's grim. People that you see as family as much as colleagues. But coming out the other side, actually what's ended up happening is the team that I've retained and the clients I've retained, we're doing much more impactful projects at better price points, faster, everyone's happier. And actually I've got this laser beam focus. It's just like I've woken up.
Fantastic.
So one half of our business is this technology-enabled consulting work. Effectively, we use our technology inside a consulting methodology in order to help organisations refresh and build their strategies, but by bringing the voice of their people and their stakeholders. We help organisations truly understand their culture with the lived experience of people, but then use that lived experience of people. They use it to co-create culture change programs. And the third bit is ultimately about how do you enhance engagement inside organisations. Why this is really exciting to me is because maybe we'll go into this in a bit, when I was doing my research back in the day, what we saw around the subject of around innovation strategy was a massive execution failure sat in the sense of two sides of it. One was that people just generally don't buy into the strategy. And the second thing is that people look at it and kind of go, don't see the reality in it, you know? So actually, when you're brave enough to listen to your stakeholders, especially your people, they know what's going on.
Yeah.
Now, they can be, the collective intelligence of your people
Yeah.
is far better than a small group of experts in a room.
Yeah. Yeah.
And even when it's not, if they buy into it,
Yeah.
the execution intelligence is sensational because they get it. They're like, we wrote that thing, let's get on with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, rather than McKinsey's coming in and spending months doing something and trying to sell a strategy to everyone.
Yeah.
People have co-created it.
Totally.
It's
a fascinating stuff, right? And so I do some work in culture change in that area. In fact, my doctorate was around that topic.
Yeah.
So that's going back a bit, like 25 years. Oh my God.
Don't look.
Thanks. But you're so kind. But you know, that whole kind of area is fascinating to me. But I think one of the things that I notice now compared to then, you know, in doing that kind of work, is almost the need for co-creation, right? It's more of an expectation from the generations that have, you know, emerged since then. So millennials, Gen Z, no doubt even more with Gen Alpha coming along. You know, I think back then the idea of landing a templated solution on an organization was probably more the anticipated, expected way that you would work in the world, because, you know, you're looking at baby boomers and Gen Xers who are kind of more expectant of that sort of, you know, top-down approach. And I think in the last 20, 25 years, that's really shifted. So, you know, it's a necessity now, if you're going to get change to happen and to stick, that there has to be some sort of co-creation process. Otherwise, there's going to be a sense of being done to rather than being part of. And that just doesn't work anymore with today's workers, right?
I totally agree. So so if I rewind a little bit, and there's many things that resonate in what you said. So where I grew up in the south of Essex, in my teenage years at least, I remember chatting to some of the mums that my mum was friends with, saying, you know, so why don't no one have jobs? You know, and I won't go into it, but I remember thinking, what's going on? It's like, oh, well, the factories have all emptied and the factories this and German, you know, and it was just sort of normal. The idea of these factories on this massive decline. And I'm thinking, what's going on there? And it just like, what I heard back then was, well, it's because there's, you know, politicians have let us down. These people have let people down. And then I started. So I went off to university. I managed to scrape into university by the skin of my teeth, and I went to study public policy and management over at Aston University. And I was in the library one day. So this is back in 1998. And I picked up a book called The Innovator's Dilemma, Why Great Firms Fail, by a sensational chap called Clayton Christensen from Harvard, who sadly is no longer with us. And it changed my life. I'm dyslexic, so I'd never read a book from cover to cover in my life, but I read this book. I was in the wrong part of the library, reading a book about a subject I shouldn't be reading. But in fact, I even remember it. It was like screamed at me on the shelf. Really odd moment. And I read it. It's like, oh my God, I'm doing the wrong degree. This is not a failure of public policy, it's a failure of innovation. Right? And he was describing these dynamics of innovation that no one was really talking about at the time. You know, the idea that actually what happens quite often in industry or in business or services, we end up oversupplying our customers with functionality and performance they don't need, and we leave this big gap underneath for new entrants to come in with simpler, less sophisticated but more meaningful propositions that can then take over. What was there is now disrupted, and of course you see this in sort of in economies that can make things cheaper, but it's not just about making things cheaper. There's other dynamics in there. But I looked at it and I thought, oh my God. But then what I kept seeing in these stories was, well, there were people in these organizations sounding the alarm, but not being heard. I thought, and Clayton Christensen didn't really focus his work on. I thought that was quite interesting. And so there I was at uni, realizing I was doing the wrong degree, having read this book.
What a nightmare.
But I would talk to anyone about it if they
Yeah.
listened. Did a placement year at British Gas as part of my degree. Bumped into this incredible woman called Fiona Lettice, who I love dearly to this day. She was really interested in the whole space around innovation and performance and improvement. And she took me under her wing a little bit. She was ex-Cranfield University.
Yeah.
And so anyway, we stayed in touch, and then she rang me a couple of years later and said, that book, Innovator's Dilemma, the whole subject of disruptive innovation, I think we could run a project on that. I might have some people interested in this. Do you want to come up and try and raise some funds and roll forward a bit of time? We'd raised a few million euros of funding from the European Commission, a bunch of companies around Europe and Israel. And I ended up running a multinational program out of Cranfield on the subject of disruptive innovation, how it interacts with strategy, human psychology, and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's the backdrop. When I then spent time in all these organizations around Europe and Israel, I was looking at these organizations and I kept hearing these people going, yeah, we're telling the leaders about this, but they're not bloody listening.
Yeah.
You're like, oh my God, like everywhere, wherever I went, leaders weren't listening to their people.
Yeah.
And it wasn't that they were bad. It was just that they were just functionally fixated.
Honestly, I think that, and I think also there's this weird isolation that comes from leadership, right? There's this expectation traditionally that exactly, that you as a leader, you should know, like that you should. That's the reason you got promoted into a leadership role, right? And as you get, you go further up the hierarchy, you become increasingly isolated. Feedback is not available. It's harder to come by. People aren't so honest in giving you the feedback. And so you end up in this weird echo chamber, which isn't really of your own making. And then, you expect that you should know everything. So you start, worrying that you don't, but not really knowing where you can consult or gather information from. So I think, what your offering is it's essential, because it's this bridge, right? It's this opportunity for people to voice their view, voice their lived experience, talk to their truth, in a way that enables them to be heard by people at the top of the organization or people in positions of power. And without that, I don't think organizations have been set up to enable that to happen naturally. So I think it's, thank you for being in the world and doing the work that you do.
So what's interesting as well, so when I developed the methodology that I called Clever Together originally, it's about bringing people into rooms and being clever together. So the experimental methodology, it actually cost quite a lot, this co-creation process. And today people are still testing different physical approaches to this, and it is expensive. I often say, but the cost of not doing it is greater, right, in the long run. But with the rise then of social media platforms and the maturity of those to be enterprise ready and safe and secure and this kind of stuff, actually what we've then done is we've developed a technological methodology that can be punctuated with physical sessions as well. So we can literally hear the voice of thousands of people. So our kind of cornerstone project in the NHS was with another wonderful human being called, by the way, that lady called Fiona, who I mentioned, she ended up going back into academia at Cranfield, and then she became the Pro Vice Chancellor of Research and Innovation at the University of East Anglia.
Brilliant.
She's only just recently retired, and she's still my mentor to this day. So shout out to Fee, because if she watches or listens to this, she'll be like, "Why didn't you?"
I mean, that's a big shout out, right? Like,
honestly, she changed my life.
Yeah.
She leaned in. You'll have had those moments when someone just spots something and just go. In fact, at Cranfield, get this. Sorry, I'm just going to go off on one for a second. There was a prof there who, when he met me in my second or third week, he just went, "Yeah, boys like you don't survive in places like this."
Wow.
Because you're basically here on a diversity ticket, which seems odd now. You're talking to a middle-aged white man. But, I come from the lowest of the low of social hierarchy.
Unbelievable, though.
But
what did that do to you, though? Like, did that make you go, "Oh, really?"
Well, you've looked at my strength scope profile.
Thanks for bringing that up.
So there's a little bit of, so this is bringing us perhaps back on track, right? There's a little bit of courage in there, right? And a little bit of creativity. And yeah, I just remember looking at him and thinking, well, I won't swear because I've my potty mouth.
Because we're live on Channel 4,
yeah, exactly, yeah. So it's, but my sense was a big fu. There's been a few moments like that in my life. And yeah, I went for it, absolutely went for it. You know,
do you mean went for it in the room with the person, or went for it in your career and the choices that you had?
The choices I made. I did things differently. You know, there weren't many PhD students my age getting paid to do their PhDs with millions of pounds worth of resources. Traveling the world.
In which case, it seems like a bizarre, challenge to put in front of you, like with this guy saying that. You're like, hello.
Yeah, because I wasn't Oxbridge educated, privately educated from some connected family. You know, I was the first to do A-levels, let alone university or PhD.
All of that, though, is such an important part of the backstory, because if you think about, what your passion is, what your calling is, in a way, to enable everyone to have a voice in a way that gets heard, so much of that must come from, those experiences. Exactly.
100%. So I remember when I was, gosh, I'll go down this path to see what happens, right? So I was 16, 17, and things were getting pretty violent where I was growing up.
Right.
And
sorry to hear that. That's tough.
Yeah. So I actually went to the police station on my own, knowing that if my mates knew I was going to do it, that I could be in, and I'd be like, look, listen, I was saying to the police, things are getting a bit heated. You need some presence up at this pub on this corner in the town here. It might actually stop people getting hurt. And they were like, yeah, thanks for coming. I was like, no, seriously. And I did it. I went up there probably once a week for a couple of months. And I just got like, no, get back in your box, mate. And I remember thinking, who else do I go to? I didn't have parents I could go to. And it was just like, so I kept trying to bring my mates into my house. My mum was brilliant in the sense that she didn't mind us all being, treated my house like a den. But when I remember I was working as a bottle boy in a nightclub at the age of 17, and loads of the guys came in and said one of our mates had been stabbed and killed at the pub where we'd all just been before. And I'm thinking, and like half of me was just like, oh my God, he's dead. I won't say who, because it'd be really, like if anyone listens, but I remember thinking, fuck, like they just, and then what went through my head was pure anger that these authorities are just not listening. And okay, I was only one voice, and I look back and it could have been, and they could give all these reasons, but I remember them coming into the college a couple of weeks later, effectively treating us as the problem.
Yeah, right. I mean, like, exactly. I didn't hear you. It's fine.
Good.
But any lip readers out there, apologies.
Yeah, right. But and there was other little moments as well in my teen years where I remember thinking, why is my mum not being heard here? This is outrageous. And then I started going into that world of looking at this sort of literature around innovation, going, why people? And I kept hearing supposed adults around me kind of going, moaning about the boss, moaning about not getting their voice. I'm thinking, why are people voiceless?
Yeah.
So,
Right.
So it's no surprise that I started this journey of coming together.
Yeah. So this, you mentioned about StrengthsGate, right? So you've completed it before. You've had a feedback session. We've had a bit of a chat about it too. And I've got it in my head, right? So I've got your wheel in my mind. But if you could just share a little bit about your strengths, the ones that, when you talk and you share these stories, I can't help, because I've been doing this for a while.
Yeah, of course. You're looking through a lens, right?
I kind of am. But I'm hearing courage. I'm hearing that standing up for what you believe in and being energized by that.
Oh, yeah.
I'm hearing enthusiasm, which is that getting behind ideas that you feel passionate about. And actually, in your case, doing something with that, right? So actually turning that, in your case, into a business idea, and also doing that with others, so there's something around not necessarily collaboration, but the relational strengths being important as well. So when you had that feedback session, did you go through the process of kind of picking out the strengths that mean the most to you, that are most energizing? And, how do you feel those strengths have kind of defined your journey? Because I hear it and I see it, but I'd love to hear your version of that.
So my top four strengths,
Yeah.
okay, compassion, courage, creativity, and decisiveness.
Okay.
And I think if you sat with any of my team, any of my close friends,
Yeah.
any of my family, that
Yeah.
they would be like, yeah, that's Pete.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and actually, I I so I think at my core,
Mm,
I've always had this sense of courage and enthusiasm.
mm,
I had to, yeah, life dealt me a set of cards where that was definitely, if I had to stand up for myself, right?
yeah. Yeah.
And but I'm oddly, so I mentioned briefly I'm dyslexic, right? Not
Mm,
massively, but
hmm.
what I learned as a kid was because I couldn't read as quickly as anyone else, write as quickly as anyone else.
Mm,
I had to think differently.
hmm.
So it's like in that space of thinking differently, I've got
Hmm.
access to creativity that I
Hmm.
bump into all the time.
Hmm.
I can just spurt out ideas. Like, it's just very easy.
Yeah.
Where other people look at me and go, where did that come from?
Mhm.
So I think my brain's a bit wired in this way to
Yeah. Yeah.
put two things together that don't normally get together and then see a third path. And people,
Yeah.
which is also why I'm quite good at facilitating rooms of people who are in disagreement,
Yeah.
because I can circle around all the different views, help people
Yeah.
bring their truth to the table, and then say,
I
well,
love
what if we
it.
start them together?
Honestly. So if I contrast that with someone who perhaps has a collaboration strength, right, I do. So the way that I would facilitate it, and I'm not in the same space as you, I'm not doing the same kind of work, but I do work with exec teams. I work with,
Yeah,
teams of
yeah.
people who may be bringing disparate views to the
I
table.
think we need to collaborate, by the way, because I
Yeah,
think
it'd be good, eh? As soon as you say that, I'm like, but collaboration is my middle name. Whatever time you want to do that, I'm happy to. But so it's a different energy, but it's a similar outcome. And I think this is one of the great joys of strengths, and understanding what it is that's
yeah,
driving you,
yeah,
and then bringing that into control so that you can manage that energy in a way that's going to benefit everyone around you, or whatever it is that you're trying to get done. So collaboration is about finding stuff in common, finding things that bridge that, maybe that gap between people,
yeah.
and then helping people work towards that, as a
Oh,
as an energy, right? And so I'm wired that way. So I'm looking for the stuff
yeah,
that's in common all the time.
right.
Whereas what
Yeah,
you're talking about is the courage part, and
yeah.
the
And the creativity.
yeah, exactly. The truth speaking and the creativity. So it's like getting people hearing the disparate views, not
Yeah.
being cowed by that or worried about that, because actually
No,
your lens is a lens of courage, right? So you're going, yeah, tell me what you
I
think, right?
think diversity is the magic.
There it is. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Oh,
So yeah, I completely understand. But it's a totally different way of getting to a similar outcome, which is how
right.
do we come to a
Yeah,
co-created solution which is going to benefit all of us? And you're encouraging people to speak their truth because of that courage
yeah,
and that creativity, that ability to bring it all together, and
yeah,
that energy for bringing it all together in ways that other people can't. And I love that you are owning that as well, and saying, I know not everyone can do it or does do it that way,
yeah,
because I get that feedback. So,
yeah.
it's like, and that's a really important lesson with strengths. So many
Mm.
people, you know, look at their own strengths and think, well, everyone can do that, can't they? Like that,
Oh
but
my God.
yeah,
So this is so just on that,
yeah,
Holly, the person who's connected us,
hmm,
who's done this work with me, with
yeah,
your fabulous tool. She's like, one of your challenges is that you've got this brilliance because of these strengths,
yeah.
but you often think that everyone else can do it.
Right, there you go. See, to my point. And so people are really forensic about the stuff that they feel they're not good at, but when and sort of assume that that's like theirs and only they have that as a challenge. Whereas when it comes to strengths, it's like, yeah, but everyone can do that though. Like mine isn't that
Really
important or different. And actually, the chances of getting the same top 7 strengths in StrengthScope in the same order as anyone else is 1 in 1.3 billion. So that it just doesn't, you're never going to meet another one of you, and that's before you even get into people's nuanced stories around
Oh,
how
oh,
their strengths actually define them, how their strengths are used day to day.
Love
So
it.
I just find, so for me, from a psychology perspective,
Yeah,
helping people step into that, this is who I am, this is what makes me unique.
yeah,
And that's meaningful because it's different from how other people will do this or approach this. And maybe that's where I can contribute the greatest value. You know, those moments where people say, it changed my life, because really they're saying it changed my perspective on me. You
yeah.
know, those are wonderful moments. So, you
The
know,
feeling.
yeah.
This really energizes you, right?
Yeah, right. And it really does. And it's interestingly similar to what you've talked about energizing you. So this idea of bringing people's authentic voice to the table,
Yeah,
for me, it's about helping people see their own authenticity in a way that they can own it, step into it, and then it starts to define their decisions
right,
and define their future career, or they
right.
recraft their role around their strengths, you know, whatever it may be, wherever, or you know, playing a particular role in a team. You know, there's all sorts of different application points. Once you have that lens, though, and there is that process that people need to go through of genuine um, uh, yeah, ownership and internalization,
Mm,
rather than it kind of being an academic exercise. It can't be. It has to be this, you know, I have these strengths, I don't have those strengths. These are the ones that I choose to step into, to talk to
mm,
allow to define
mm,
who I am. You know,
mm.
that's a difference. So many people are wired towards that. I know what I'm bad at because I've been told it repeatedly. As soon as I was born, I was told what I wasn't good at, or that I should stop crying, or I should eat something
Oh,
different, or whatever, you know.
yeah,
But actually then getting really much more forensic about the stuff that we love, that we're passionate about, that drives us, that naturally we're drawn towards,
yeah.
is just alien, you know. So this
It's,
off,
you know,
yeah, go
so when my son came out of school, um, when was this? This was last summer. He came out of school and he said, "Daddy, I got 9 out of 10 on my spelling test." I was like, "Well done, son." And then this little lad next to him said, "I did too." I went, "Oh, well done." And then that lad's mum was standing there, and I'm standing here. My response was, "What was the hardest word you got right?"
on.
Because I'm like, I'm really curious.
Mm,
And she just went, "What did you get wrong?" And I went, "Oh." And that question even popped into my thoughts.
no, but it's
It's like
common,
shining the spotlight on the wrong stuff.
aren't we?
I'm like,
Aren't we? And we are, and it's global, that as an effect, right? So there's been work done looking at where parents focus on their report cards of their kids. This is global. This is across dozens of countries. It's
right,
the same everywhere. Everybody, almost all parents focus on the D's, the E's, the F's, the C's. They don't focus on the A's and the B's. And in particular, what you're talking about, which is the challenge part, the stretch part, the what was most difficult, and where did you put the effort in order to get to that really good result, you know, which is growth mindset stuff. It's just not typical, you know, of where parents go,
and I just
because
remember
they've had
seeing,
that same experience themselves of
and I
being
think
told,
that's it.
yeah,
I think that's it, isn't it? It's like you often repeat these patterns,
yeah,
or you do the work on yourself and break
yeah.
the patterns.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly. But in order
That,
to do that, you've got to know there's an alternative. And I think, you know, still now there is that negativity bias that we're steeped in from very early life.
mm,
And unless someone comes along and shows that there's a different and a legitimate different way of thinking, you know, which is enabling something that people feel, you know, this is going to be meaningful to me, and I feel, you know, like I understand what you're telling me. People just default back to that negativity bias. It's just we're socialized to it. You know, it probably does have an evolutionary component to it, you know, from a
yeah.
long time ago. You know, if I focus on the weakest members of the tribe and bring them to be stronger or exclude them, then we will survive. So, you know, there probably was some element of evolutionary value
Um,
to that thinking, but that's long gone. You know, like we need to shift it up. It's time to evolve, everybody. Let's focus
um,
as much on the positive. So yeah, I mean, anything more you want to share about your, because relational strengths are really important to you as well. You have
yeah,
talked about that.
yeah.
Yeah, but
So just on that then, just on that. so one of the things I'm present to in your work
Yeah.
is this idea of the strengths having a shadow side to them as well.
Yes. Yeah.
When I'm feeling at my best, when I'm
Mhm.
feeling like I'm sitting in 100% of my true powerful self,
Yeah.
I know what I'm bringing is compassion and courage and creativity and decisiveness.
Yeah.
Right. I know that that's who I am.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, they don't often seem to be the immediately right things of being someone who stands in the space for collective intelligence is what I'm all about, right? But actually, where I'm at is in that compassion space, is I'm in absolute service of other people.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm creating a space for people to be their true, authentic selves,
Mm-hmm.
to bring their own lived experience to the table. And I have the courage when someone tries to block that or stop that to tell them to sling the hook, I hold that space. This is absolutely vital.
Yeah.
And I have the courage to take that lived experience, that wisdom from people with the lived experience to those people with power and passion to actually make change. So I hold this space actually as I'm a facilitator. I've got this ability to empathize, and I bring these other three groups together. It's people with lived experience, it's people with specialist knowledge, and people with power.
Yeah.
And you bring these three groups together and you can do incredible things.
Yeah.
Quite often what happens is there's a need to not just to listen, but to then elevate, like to go, but what if? And that's where this creativity piece comes in. And then someone's got to make a decision. So then I work really hard on going, right, here's where we go.
So much sense.
So I see this.
It's almost a flow, right? I mean, it's an actual right. So you're coming from a place of love.
I didn't mention that. I mentioned that on the call before this. But everything is about a place of love.
Yeah. So that's your start point, right? Like, I'm going to hold the space for you, and I'm not going to judge anything that you say.
Exactly.
In fact, the opposite. I need you to talk to your lived experience. That's what I'm here to help happen. Exactly. But then the idea around the creativity and the linking piece, right? To make it make sense for everybody, and then making a decision. That's the piece that I don't know, like decisiveness you picked out as, like a defining strength. And I was thinking, where does that fit in? And you just explained it. It's a process flow.
Right. And you've got to get on with it, because it's really easy to come up with loads of ideas, but unless you do something with them, it's just brain farts, right? And so this is why you've got to make choices.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that I often end up doing is bringing the collective intelligence of people together to create effectively strategic frameworks or new frameworks of decision making, which everybody's now bought into. So one of the things that live right now, in fact, I was looking just before you and I started this call today. There's the best part of 1,000 people involved on one of our platforms in one of the big hospitals up in the Midlands, where they're all coming together to have this conversation about the behaviours they should expect and not tolerate from each other, right? And so it's this like, let's be really clear. What should we expect? It's effectively our professional standards, if you like, inside this organisation.
Yeah.
When we analyse that, we'll ladder that up into a new values framework with defined behavioural expectations, right? Which then effectively set out the rules for how we want to treat each other at work, the journey we want to go on. And then because they've co-created it, we can make the decision, right, this is now going to be used as a management tool, as a leadership tool. We're going to use this tool to rewire all of our processes for how we hire, how we admire, inspire, retire, fire. We're going to use these, how we communicate with our people, how we communicate with our customers, etc. But because they've co-created it, right, we can then make that decision. Right, from now on, we've got to do this. Right. So but without the decision, without the decisiveness, it's just a big conversation.
Love it. Absolutely, I see it.
But here's when I mentioned the dark side. Here's the other
please.
side.
I was going to come back to that, but I didn't need to.
So the compassion part, when I'm in that space of being in service of others, and I just feel like my job is to make sure everybody is heard and everybody's looked after. And the downside to that is that when I'm in that space, I sometimes feel bad about the idea of holding people to account. So I'll a colleague might say, well, little Abdul today at school, he's had this and not done that, and so I've got to go home, and and that's why this thing is not delivered. And I'm like, fine, we're a family first business, right? And that's okay if it's like every now and then and we do these things. But what I've noticed in this sort of part of my life where I've been so committed to those relationships, actually what I've then done is it's almost like my working relationships sometimes have become more like family relationships, and you become so forgiving, so willing to shift, and then actually what I've experienced as well is I almost end up becoming like a dad, rather than a leader of a business, because then I'm sort of shepherding this little family in service of these people.
Love it.
And so much compassion, but I'm like, well, hang on, where's my voice in this? And also I set this business up to deliver an outcome. And now we're orientating it around this group of people who love to do these things, but actually I'm on a mission to give people voice and to help leaders be wiser. And I'm like, so I've had this wake up call. Whilst I need to hold that space with courage and bravery and creativity and decisiveness, I've also got to amplify a little bit of that decisiveness into that space of compassion, because otherwise I'm not going to hold people to account.
I love it. That's really, and great, I totally get it. If you're using the Strengthscape language, that's exactly, it feels like what's going on. Bringing decisiveness to hold people to account, to kind of get to an end point with the compassion. Otherwise it becomes self-serving as an energy rather than serving either the team or you or the wider aim, right?
So here's the thing. One of the some of my team members have said what we need is more detail. We need more what's the word? We need more detail. We need more structure and plans. And as soon as that happens, I'm like,
see, we haven't talked about this before, right?
This is the other side, right?
So but this is efficient.
I'm not as energizing.
Correct, right? So we've just talked about strengths in overdrive as that shadow side of energy going too far and having to bring it back into your service of you and service of what you're trying to do, and you using decisiveness to counter compassion.
Well, this is but also to counter the fact that I'm not massively
so then there's the other risk area that we see is where energy is less, right? So where you're less drawn towards certain activities and tasks, and actually efficiency, results focus, and detail orientation are the three project management strengths. So people who love project management, look at your eyes go. Like when I said that, you're like, like,
I've got good people in my team.
Yeah, exactly. And the same for me, right? So like none of those energize me. There's
a chap in my team, a chap called Osama. Oh my God. He is an absolute legend.
Yeah.
He's one of our project directors. And when he gets hold of a project, man, you look at him and he is energized by that. And I'm energized by your energy.
Yeah.
I'm thankful that I'm not doing that bit now. I know I've got it in my locker, but
but do you think that, as well, there's your compassion there, and developing others as well for you is quite, so it's like you're seeing someone else's joy in delivering stuff that is not energizing to you at all, and that brings its own energy. So it's a really nice way of just kind of recognizing what someone else can do skills wise, but also energy wise. It's not just about because you can have a detail orientation skill where you're really good at having an eye for detail, making sure that every I is dotted and T crossed and all the rest of it. But if it doesn't energize you, then by our definition, it isn't really a strength. It's more of a skill. It's probably a learned behavior rather than it be a true strength.
Something just occurred to me that so in the past, where I've been so committed to being in service of others from this place of compassion, when it's called upon for me to then be that in the real detail, in the absolute space of being results focused and dotting the I's and crossing the T's, in service of that need, I've just jumped into it, right? But I'm doing it I'm energized because I'm doing it for others.
Yeah.
So I recognize now at any times when I've just smashed it out of the park and being results orientated or really, in the detail, my whole energy is being driven from a place of being in service.
Yeah, no, completely get it.
And so from that perspective, it means I can be a bit of a chameleon, because it's like man maths, like I can always man math buying another bike, right? I've got my little Brompton in the background there, right?
Yeah, that's it.
So, what's that phrase? The optimum number of bikes you can have is n+1, right? And so I can always man math getting another bike. But one of the other challenges is being highly relational, especially in this space around compassion, is that I can man math anything. If someone needs me to do something, I'm from that place of compassion. I'll go do it, even if it doesn't play to my natural energy.
Yeah.
But then eventually I'm knackered.
That's exactly, because you're not actually playing to the strengths that's what it is. That's what's happening. So you can pull on those relational strengths because, that's a natural place for you to be in service to others. And it's going to give you energy up to a point. But if what you're asking yourself to do is something that is way out of your strength zone, then it's just going to end up feeling exhausting in the end. So, the idea, right, of strengths is do more of the stuff that you actually enjoy doing, because you're going to be able to keep going, but not to the point where it's in overdrive, because that can become really tiring. And I've met so many leaders who've been in service to a particular strength and they've kind of dug into that for energy. So resilience is a good example, right? Not one, I don't think that's one that shows up on yours. It's not one that shows up on mine, but it's about taking on big challenges and loving that and being energized by it. The bigger the challenge, the better.
Yeah.
If you take that to its natural conclusion, you're going to take on something in the end which is impossible and insurmountable to achieve what you're trying to achieve with. And that's going to ultimately lead to you burning out, probably, or getting yourself out of the situation out of necessity because of a survival need. And that's often what happens with people who they've left their resilient strength unchecked for too long. So it's defined their career. They've gone after bigger and bigger and bigger challenges. And in the end, it's found them out almost to the point where they're just done and they've got to extract themselves, reset and start all over again.
That's a really interesting thought. So my work orientates around we call it the 5 wicked issues. All of our work in my business and with my team, it's all about focusing on the physical and mental well-being crisis that we face right now, the obstacles to creating compassionate, inclusive and adaptive workplaces, and adaptive in the sense that it's innovative, looking at the class ceiling and the snowy white peaks, this kind of obstacles to social mobility and belonging for all. The last two about the unintended consequences of the use of digital tools and technologies and the breakdown of democratic systems. These two ones are starting to feature more and more in our work. But the reason why I mentioned, because you said about these big challenges, when I look at those 5 areas, I meet activists all the time. And you meet these activists, and in the red corner there's the activist, in the blue corner there's the person who's holding the status quo. The activists are coming out fighting, and they've got this big beautiful world view of how things should be, and they're never happy. And even if that world view was now delivered tomorrow, well, they would extend out. Right? And eventually, what I see in activists, sadly, is they often end up being knackered or heartbroken. And then where I find myself is in the middle, right? I look at the people, the traditionalists, and kind of go, man, I get that change for you is hard. Like, I feel it. But I look at the activists and I'm totally inspired. And so in the middle ground is this innovator. So I'm always happy with progress. And as long as we're making progress towards this bigger goal, brilliant. And if I can see progress, I'm energized. But I'm drawn by this activist. But I'm never going to be tired. I've always got energy. And so there's something in that like taking on those big goals. These 5 wicked issues, they are big issues.
They are, huge.
Right? I'm never going to solve all of them. But we can bring the evidence, lived experience, and voices of people to the centre of changing those and really shift
Yeah,
you
there's
know?
something about that nudging forward, right? Rather than feeling that you've got to own the whole thing and be responsible for delivering the change solely,
Oh,
and carrying
that is
that with
quite,
you.
it's quite arrogant.
Yeah, well, yeah, but I guess if you have a resilient strength, right, you're going to see that as legitimately something that's going to really energize you because you believe in it so much, you believe in the challenge, and you're energized by the challenge, so you're going to go after it. If you don't have a resilient strength, that's going to
Mm.
be less energy. It's going to be less of a thing to move towards. So actually, where you go with that, arguably, is into your strengths. So you go into the relational space. So you're holding this space for people to kind of get together and co-create
Having the
solutions.
courage to change, to challenge the status quo.
Yes, absolutely. So that comes in, but ultimately it's, well, we need to come up with something practical that is going to move
Together.
things forward together. Exactly. So it's all those strengths kind of, coming together and singing together really, in a way which is gonna take a group forward towards a
You're just,
solution.
you're just making me think about a few clients that when I met them, met their organizations, I thought, oh my gosh, we could do amazing stuff.
Mm,
And then where I bumped off them slightly.
mhm,
And I suspect if we'd sat down and looked at each other's strength scope profile, they may have been high in the resilience space,
mm,
because they're saying, like, for example, that second of those 5 things I mentioned, the obstacles to creating compassionate,
mhm.
inclusive and adaptive workplaces. This is a huge passion of mine.
Yeah,
And I think it's a big part of the solution to the first one as well, about the physical
yeah,
and mental well-being crisis.
yeah.
Um, that if we can help organizations become compassionate, inclusive and adaptive
Mhm,
places to be, then, oh my God, people's lives will be so much better. And
mm,
then you meet the chief people officer in an organization, and it's their, like, with this resilience strength, and
mm,
it's their absolute mission.
mm.
And it's almost like, it's like, if you're not working, if they're not doing it their way, what's
Yeah,
the phrase? My way or the highway.
yeah, yeah,
Where my view is actually collectively in this organization, you've got the intelligence to
yeah,
fix things.
yeah,
You've got to listen to everybody.
yeah.
And you've actually, as a leader, got to take a step back. You've got to
Mhm,
have the courage
mhm,
to believe in your people,
mhm.
right?
Yeah,
And actually, when they say these are the top 10 things we've got to do, then implement,
mm,
right? Because they've said it. If you don't do it,
yeah,
but here's the thing: if you implement them and they don't work, well, that's okay, because now we know we've got to bring in other knowledge and other
yeah,
intelligence,
yeah,
But it's actually about not owning the entire problem yourself, but
yes.
actually creating a space for everybody to own it.
And but you're seeing, and it feels like, when you've spotted that, when with that resilience idea, somebody who has that as a strength and that defines them, that it's
Right.
actually really hard for them to then lose that sense of responsibility and
It's really
ownership and
interesting.
move towards a natural space for you, which is the relational space, right? Where you would go, like, co-creation just makes sense. And they're going, yeah, but it's my responsibility to bring these. It's what, similar to what I was talking about earlier, where you get, so far up the tree, you believe that you need to be the
Yeah.
solution creator, and that's what you're being paid to do. Um, Plus, to compound that, I think the chief people officer, the HR director, they have such a tough gig
Oh
because
no.
it's such a tough profession, HR, because you're surrounded all the time by all these people issues, these really sticky, tricky people issues. So I'm not surprised that people who are in that career kind of trajectory tend to have a resilient strength. Not always, but it's quite common. So a lot of the
Mm,
people that I've coached over the years who are in senior HR roles do have that resilient strength. So they're
mm,
attracted to sticky, challenging stuff.
mm.
But it can become an overdriven strength, if you like. And that can then lead to that exclusion as you're talking about, and not necessarily going to the relational stuff as a natural place.
Yeah.
So yeah, fascinating.
So I've got a question on that.
Yeah.
So, so in my work, there's right at the centre of everything is this is an evidence-based belief that inside diversity is where the magic happens. I think I might have
Hmm.
even
Hmm.
and that with diverse minds,
Hmm.
and when I say diversity, there's many factors of diversity.
Yes.
The obvious ones that people talk about, but to me, actually, there's a lot to be said about our cognitive diversity,
Hmm.
our diversity of social class, and
Hmm.
things that don't get talked about immediately. But when you bring that diversity of thinking together, the wisdom that can be pulled out of that is incredible, right? And so, yeah, so I built my team with diversity in mind. All of our projects can identify we've got diversity of thinking up at everything, right? So in your work, when you then sit there and you look at people through the prism that you look at, do you see any correlations between diversity of leadership teams and success?
Yeah.
Or do you,
I mean, I'll answer the question directly, right? Because I've been asked to come in to speak to boards recently who don't have diversity of lived experience in the room, which is quite common, or, senior leadership teams. And they're asking that question, they're saying, well, what should we do about it? Is it about bringing in more diverse experiences to the room? And yeah, that's part of it, but you've got to be prepared to hear those voices, right? To bring people onto the same playing field so that the diversity doesn't leave. The diversity of thinking doesn't just walk out the door because it actually isn't being heard. So, it comes back to your space of making sure that you're creating that safe space in order for those conversations to happen. But I think for me, with the strengths approach, it does provide a lens, it does provide a perspective where you can start to hear differences of opinion and view and start points, so people with thinking strengths or certain strengths in that space, other people with the execution strengths, like everyone's got a different energy that they're bringing into those conversations, and it can enable that level playing field. It can start to level the playing field for people because it's a common language everyone can connect on from an individual perspective. So yeah, I mean, I found it really helpful to introduce the idea of more diverse thinking. And it is, yes, the lived experience, the different kind of, demographic groups that you may be part of is part of that. But it is also how you think. It's, as you say, the cognitive strengths, as well as, all the strengths, the relational strengths, the execution strengths, the emotional strengths that you may bring to the table. So yeah, it's a really helpful tool for senior leadership teams to explore what level of diversity do we have within our strength set. What kind of strength monsters might we have created inadvertently? Now we're looking at our combined strengths wheel and seeing some of these are really big, but we never really realized it. But now it makes sense of the energy that we get when we get together. But also, where are we missing out? What are the strengths that we don't have in the room that, that actually are getting in our way? And I was talking to you just before about, a senior leadership team where they had a lot of emotional strengths, drawing energy from within, a lot of execution strengths, getting stuff done, but very little in the thinking space or in the relational space. So they were leaving people behind, and people didn't feel part of their journey, and they were getting increasingly isolated. And that's quite common to see. So shining a light on that and saying, well, what are we going to do about it? Their answer was, well, we need to bring some people into the room to hear from them around, making sure that they feel part of the journey and how our message is and how our strategy is landing. So it's kind of it's moving more into your space in their own way without doing the full, let's co-create a solution here around change. But it was an acknowledgement of, we don't have all the strengths here, and that's a problem. Because we just don't have that lens to look through. Who does? Let's find somebody who can bring that difference of opinion that we need, we recognize now, because now we're looking at that strengths wheel. We can see there are great big hulking gaps there that we just didn't.
And one of the one of the things that I've experienced in the work I do, especially around bringing the voice of people into strategy or to culture change, or bringing the voice of people into the designing programs of improvement, is that we find that leaders often, some leaders talk a good game at the beginning of that, saying, yeah, absolutely, we've got to really listen, and then you start the process and you think, oh man, this leader, they just want you to tick the bloody box. And then because one of my strengths is around courage, I call it out. I'm quite comfortable with sacking a client if I have to. Right, I've got no problem with that, because I'm like, or maybe maybe I've got more of a problem with it now because I've got slightly different aspirations. But I do it in a different way, maybe. But the bit for me is that diversity of thinking for me isn't just in that room. It's the room. It's the rooms of people, and organisations, and communities which they're leading.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And actually, there's some real bravery to be able to say, I'm going to listen and then act upon those words and those hopes and fears from others. And the bit for me that we've cut through, and I think it's really interesting, is quite often you'll get an exec team who are being fed lots of information from other leaders in the organisation, and they effectively shield that exec team from what's actually going on. So they often paint a greener, prettier picture of reality. So we've got a live conversation right now with an organisation of 7,000 staff, and we've gone out to the organisation and basically said, tell us the beautiful, the good, the bad and ugly experiences of working in this organisation. Beautiful, the good, the bad and the ugly.
Nice.
So you get these so it's very much an appreciative inquiry driven approach, except giving voice to the negative as well. Which is something that maybe we should talk about another time. But in that organisation, you can see when they are performing at their best, they are incredible. The leaders are really present. People's voice are heard. They are responsive to their customers. They are on fire. But the other end of the spectrum, people feel bullied. People feel harassed. They can't bring their full selves to work. Heaven forbid I mention my religion or my sexuality. And you've got this full spectrum. The exec team never hear it. Right. And actually, all of a sudden, they were saying they got us involved because they were saying we're a little bit. We think we've got a good culture, but we just don't want to take that for granted. We really want to understand what it's like to be here in this organisation. And we're presenting this, and they're like, "Oh my God, what have we opened up? Our organisation's a mess." And it's like, no, you've just been shielded. You are disconnected from the reality. You've got talent walking out the door, people being frustrated, but that's okay. This is quite normal. And now we've got that understanding. Now you've literally heard that lived reality. Now you can own it, do something about it. This is why I think the work that we do around values is so important, because if we're now going to say our values are, I know we did the work with Santander around simple, personal, fair back in the day. If we now say that we want to be simple, personal, and fair, well, and we get feedback like we've just had, well, we're not being simple, personal, and fair. So actually, how do we use our values now together, collectively, in order to be the kind of organisation, in order to have the culture we want? And so this idea of a kind of a culture understanding through a matrix, cultures work like this. You've got that type of nonsense. For us, it's like we've got these values that we espouse to have. Is our culture right now, does it look like these values? No. Well, what are we going to do about it? And bring the voice of people into that. And it takes brave leaders and that bravery to listen to that diversity and to embrace that diversity, to be truly inclusive. When
it's asking so much, right? I mean,
but when we do it, it's so powerful and it's so human.
Okay, we're gonna have to bring it to a conclusion.
Oh man, how long are we talking? I'm not looked. Like an hour.
Over.
Oh my God. Well, I found it interesting.
It's been amazing, Pete, honestly.
But I'm guessing other people may have tuned out
after probably not. It's been a fascinating conversation. So thank you so much for bringing fully you and through a strengths lens, right? Added, so extra. So thank you for that. Is there anywhere that you would point people towards if they're interested in getting in touch with you? That's the first thing. And then B, anything that you would point them towards by way of listening to, reading, watching that you love, and that you in terms of what we've been discussing, that you would recommend people have a look at or move towards.
So reach out on LinkedIn. Pete Thomond, Thomond. and Clever Together's website is about to go through one of those big shifts, as with so look out for that. It's clevertogether.com.
Yep.
And I started getting a bit back into Twitter. So at Pete Thomond on Twitter.
Twitter, is it? Is that what it's called? Have they changed it back again?
You know what I mean? Well, I don't like calling it X. I'm still like about that.
Yeah,
I'll just stick to Twitter.
I mean, honestly, journalists are still kind of going X brackets for Twitter,
because
because it doesn't really fit in sentences very well. It's really confusing.
It's very weird, isn't it?
What are you doing? Writing a little kiss to me? I don't understand why you're saying that.
Anytime, darling.
Anything you'd recommend by way of resources?
Yeah, so oh my word. So you asked me that before, and the truth is I didn't really plan anything.
It's all right.
Yeah. So in terms of resources, what I might do is I might send you a couple of little things.
Yeah, do it. That'd be perfect.
Stick on the links.
Yeah.
But I think if anyone's really interested from this conversation about how they may look at improving their performance and culture, especially if they're interested in co-producing strategies or co-producing an understanding of their culture and how they can shift it, or how they can enhance engagement and co-create alignment around shared priorities.
Yeah.
And if you're really interested in bringing the voice and lived experience of people to the centre of change, get in touch. And even if it's just to swap notes and share ideas,
I mean, that's the thing, because so much of it is just, in the conversation, there's the value, and you can kind of, there's elements that I think a lot of people who are in, L&D or HR or, even in operational management roles, there's an awful lot in what you've shared that they can do and start to do by way of their own practice in terms of kind of co-creating a culture and shifting a culture, like you say at Santander or within, health or so on. Yes, that's a larger undertaking. It would make a lot of sense to talk to you, from a different angle. But I think, just in the conversation, there's so much value around, this is a different way of thinking. How do I bring those voices to the table, and how do I get that wisdom shared in a way that is different from, how I've done it before? So yeah, brilliant. Okay. The resource then that you're recommending is you.
Well, maybe it is. I'm in the midst of writing a lot of this up. I keep threatening to turn it into a book, but it won't be a book that's like others. It would just be a bit more of a handbook,
Love it. Yeah, perfect. Yeah, but, use your decisiveness. Yeah.
No one. Yeah, I was about to go off on one. I won't. Paul, you are a legend. I'm so pleased with our piles of props.
Oh, absolutely.
Subjects I want to get into with you around appreciative inquiry.
Yeah, we should talk about that.
Positive psychology, the highs and lows.
Yeah, let's do another one.
Oh man, there's a whole bunch of stuff around trauma-informed practices as well.
Okay.
Which is something that you would find it really interesting.
Yeah, brilliant.
We do a lot of work in mental health, so there's a whole shift there.
Yeah.
And then even the subjects specifically around disruptive innovation and how that plays out for strategy and ambidextrous organizations. And
wow.
Man.
So much. Okay. We will leave it for now, but I really appreciate, I've just written a load of notes there. I was just writing all the things down just so we remember we're going to talk about them at another point. So we will do that. We'll definitely do that. And me and you'll have a chat as well. But thank you so much, Pete. I really appreciate you taking the time and sharing so much wisdom, which you absolutely is how it's felt. So thanks so much.
You're a legend. Thank you.
Cheers, Pete.